Of Chinese literature. In this literature, I'm going to tackle about the characteristic of Chinese literature. But before that, let us all define first the Chinese literature. Chinese literature is the body of works written in Chinese, including lyric poetry. When we say lyric poetry, it is a formal types of poetry which express personal emotions or feelings typically spoken in the first person. Next, historical. Historical it is the belonging to the past, not the present. Didactic writing. Didactic writing. Didactic writing is one of the meant to be instructive as well as artistic. Drama. A drama it is a written work that tells a story through action, speech that is acted out, and various of fictions, and that is the Chinese literature. So now let us move on to the Chinese literature. Chinese literature it is extend thousands of years from the earliest recorded dynastic court archives to the mature vernacular fictions novel that arise during the Ming Dynasty to entertain the masses of literate Chinese. Chinese literature is one of the oldest in the world. The history of this literature is about 300 years old when ideographic writing was invented. Now let us move on to the characteristic of Chinese literature. Through cultural contacts, Chinese literature has profoundly influenced the literary traditions of other Asian countries, particularly Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. Not only was the Chinese script adapted for the written languages in these countries, but some writers adopted the Chinese language as their chief literary medium. The graphic nature of written aspect of Chinese language has produced a number of not worthy effect upon Chinese literature and its diffusions. First, Chinese literature, especially poetry, is recorded in the handwritten or in print and purports to make an aesthetic appeal to the readers that is visual as well as aural. The second, this visual appeal of the graphs has in fact given a rise to elevated status of calligraphy in China where it has been regarded for at least last 16 centuries of fine arts. Comparable to painting, scroll calligraphy renderings of poems and prose selections have continued to be hung alongside paintings in the home of the common people as well as the elite, converting these literary gems into something to be enjoyed in every living. The third characteristic of Chinese literature, it is a negative side such as the writing system has been an impediment of education and the spread of literacy, thus reducing the number of readers of literature for even rudimentary level of reading. Of lecture. For even level of reading and writing requires knowledge of more than 1,000 graphs together with their pronunciations. And the last characteristic it is in the other hand, the Chinese written language, even with its obvious disadvantage, has been potent factor of perpetuating the cultural unity of the growing millions of the Chinese people, including assimilated groups in far-flung fertile areas. Different and functions from recording words in alphabetic phonetic language, the graphs are not primary indicators of sounds and can be therefore pronounced in variant ways to accommodate geographical diversity in aspect of historical phonetic changes with damage of the article is about the flag used by various Chinese regimes. For the flags used in Taiwan, area controlled by the Republic of China Sea, less of Taiwanese flags. For the current flag of the People's Republic of China, see Flag of China. For the current flag of the Republic of China Sea, Flag of the Republic of China. The flag of China, officially the national flag of the People Republic of China, also known as the five-star red flag. is a Chinese red filled with a five golden star charged at the canton. The design features one larger star with four smaller stars and arc set off towards the fly. It has been the national flag of China since the foundation of the People's Republic of China on October 1, 1949. The red represents the Chinese community revolutions and the five star and their relationship to be each other represent the unity of the Chinese people. Under the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, the flag was first hoisted by the People Liberations Army.
Five Classic. Let's define first what is Five Classic. The Five Classics, it is the basis of civil examinations in Imperial China and the Confucian Canon. The Five Classics consists of the Book of Odes, Book of Documents, Book of Changes, Book of Rites, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. Book of Odes. The Book of Odes is also translated as the Book of Songs or Book of Poetry. The Book of Odes is composed of 305 poems dealing with a range of issues, including love and marriage, agricultural concerns, daily lives, and war. The Book of Odes contains different categories of poems, including folk songs and hymns used in sacrifice. Gongzei is believed to have selected the 305 poems in this collection from a much wider collection. This book believed to be compiled by Confucian. These are believed to be the oldest existing examples of Chinese poetry. The collection includes refined folk song, ritualistic poems, dynastic legends, and hymns for ancestral temples. Book of Documents. The Book of Documents is a compilation of 58 chapters detailing the events of ancient China. The Book of Documents tells the deaths of the early sage kings Yao and Shan. These narratives are influential in the development of the understandings of sage. The compilation also includes the history of Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. The Book of Documents is often considered the first narrative history of ancient China. The Book of Documents or Classic of History, also known as the Shangsu, is one of the five classics of ancient Chinese literature. It is a collection of rhetorical prose attributed to figures of ancient China, and served as the foundation of Chinese political philosophy for over 2,000 years. The chapters are grouped into four sections, representing different eras. Semi-mythical reigns of Yu the Great, and the Xia, Shang, and the last one is Zhou dynasties. The Zhou section accounts for over half the text. This edition also includes a classical Chinese quick study guide with an added study reference for the 100 most frequent classical Chinese characters. Book of Changes. The Book of Changes contains a system of divination, which is centered largely around the principle of yin and yang. The Book of Changes has also been translated as I Ching, or Classic of Changes. Some of the divination practices are still used today. This book is also known as the I Ching. It has been used for over 3,000 years to gain knowledge of the future or to interpret how you should act. It is a kind of oracle if you like. The book is about an acceptance of change and willingness to act in the best way possible. Unlike Western thought, where things are supposed to have a cause, Chinese people often believe in synchronicity. What is synchronicity? Synchronicity is the coincidence of events. So when thinking about the Book of Changes, this means that you only do the right results at the moment in time. Book of Rites. The Book of Rites describes the social norms, governmental organization, and the ritual conduct during Zhou Dynasty. Believed to have been compiled by the Gongzi, the Book of Rites is the foundation of many ritual principles that arise in later imperial China. According to the Book of Rites, proper ritual conduct would maintain harmony in the empire, as well as emphasize the virtue of beauty. This Book of Rites is also known as the Lishi, one of the 5 classics of the Confucian canon, which had significant influence on Chinese history and culture. The book was rewritten and edited by the disciples of Confucius and their students after the burning of the books. During the rule of Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of China, around 213 BC, the work describes the social forms, governmental system, and ceremonial rites of Zhou Dynasty. Li literally means rites, but it also can be used to refer to ceremonial or rules of conduct, traditional forms that provides a standard of conduct. The ideas of Li became closely associated with human nature, ethics, and social order as the people integrated these ideas into their lives. The work contains decrees and institutions, rules and regulations, and rituals and etiquettes. Spring and Autumn Annals. The Spring and Autumn Annals is the longest of the 5 classics. The Spring and Autumn Annals is a historical chronicle of the state of Lu. Unlike the Book of Documents, the Spring and Autumn Annals appear to have been created specifically for annalistic purposes. The Spring and Autumn Annals was traditionally understood as being written by Confucius, but modern scholars believe the text was actually written by various chroniclers from the state of Lu. Spring and Autumn Annals, or Chuanqiu, is an ancient Chinese chronicle that has been one of the core Chinese classics since ancient times. The Annals is the official chronicles of the state of Lu and covers a 241-year period from 722 to 481 BC. It is the earliest surviving Chinese historical text to be arranged in annals form.
What is 5 classics and 4 books? 5 classics and 4 books are authoritative books of Confucianism, considered as Confucian canon. Canonical works of Confucian culture cover a wide range of subjects and collection of books. Next, we have Confucius, a Chinese philosopher and a politician of spring and autumn period, paragon of Chinese sagas, a period from Zhou Dynasty which is approximately from 771 to 476 BCE. Confucius was considered by the Chinese as a great king and a model of excellence and perfection by saga. Confucianism, an ancient Chinese belief system. Sa Confucianism, whether being a philosophy or a religion is still debated. The teaching is based from Confucius' principle, but be reminded that Confucius is not the one who formed Confucians. It is formed by his scholar who created this after Confucius died and used his philosophies and beliefs as their principle. It has existed for over 2,500 years. It is concerned with inner virtue, morality, and respect for the community and its values. The 4 books, which is the Great Learning, the Mencius, the Analects, and the Doctrine of the Mean. First, we have the Great Learning by Confucius. The Great Learning is a guide for self-cultivation. Self-cultivation is learning and investigation of things. So when we say self-cultivation, it is the development of one's minds and capacities. This tells us the connection between our body and our mind. So when we have self-cultivation, this allows us to understand and comprehend the word better. The second book is Analects. Analects also is known to be the most rewarded, the most honored and respected scripture in the Confucian tradition. The purpose of it is to spread idea and keep record of the original text for later references and serve as foundation of the Chinese education. So next we have the Mencius. Mencius places a strong emphasis on the responsibility of emperor to practice good governance through following the way. So when we say good governance, that means how leaders should govern, organize, and lead their group or nation. Through following the way that I mentioned is about the Confucian thoughts and belief. It is used as basis for governing their country. So we have the last book, which is the Doctrine of the Mean, and it emphasizes the fact that the good governance relies on the man. So the man mentioned here is not just limited to man but also to woman. What he is trying to say is that the good governance relies to the people. So what heaven confess is called nature. That means, or that nature here is what God has given us. Accordance with this nature is the way, or cultivating the way is called the education. So education is based from how we act as a people. I'm Abigail C. Adana from BSC 3B and thank you for watching.
Koyan was a statesman and poet during the Warring State period. He has been attributed to the first 7 poems of the Chuxi, Songs of the Chu. He served under King Huai but was banished after composing the poem. Li Shao, encountering sorrow, which attacked the court for failing to listen to his advice. He committed suicide by throwing himself in a river. This one was a painter, musician, poet, and devout godfish. He composed landscape poems while roaming the lands near the Wang River, which exchanged verses with his friends Pai Di. A Zen master taught him the doctrine of Donmu, instantaneous enlightenment, and his later poetry reflects his devotion. He was referred to as Shifu, or the Buddha of poetry. The poet Sushi said of his works, "There is painting in his poetry, in his painting." Wang Wei founded the Southern School of Painters Poets. He is particularly known as landscape painters, developing the possibilities of monochrome and pomo, breaking the ink technique in which ink is applied in patches or watches that leaves. Poetry is widely anthologized and he is frequently mentioned alongside other poets of the Tang dynasty, such as Li Pu and Tu Fu. The third writer, Lok Sun, 1881 to 1936, studied medicine in Japan as a young man but ultimately concluded that he was better served as a writer. In 1918, he published his first short story, A Madman's Diary, the first colloquial story in modern Chinese literature. His writings comprise many genres, from fiction to Zawen, satire to a historical account of Chinese fiction. Mao Zedong called Lu the standard bearer of the new Chinese culture that arose after the May 4th movement. Lok Sun, a Chinese writer, essayist, poet, and literary critic. He was leading figure in modern Chinese literature, writing in a vernacular Chinese and classical Chinese. He was a short story writer, editor, translator, and literary critic. and Lu is widely regarded as one of modern Chinese most prominent and influential writers. His work promoted radical change through criticism and antiquated culture's values and repressive social costume. Chinese sports, Dudo or Dude. Chinese-born 1951 is the pen name of contemporary Chinese poet Li Shizing, a prominent exponent of the Chinese mystic poets. Dudu was awarded the 2010 Neustadt International Prize for Literature. Dudu was born in Beijing, China. As a youth of Cultural Revolution, he was sent down to countryside in Beijing, where he began reading and writing poetry. Several of his comments would also become famous as members of the underground poetry movement described amnesty by the authors Bai Di Dao, Gou Cheng, and Monkey. Zhu Zimu was an early 20th century romantic Chinese poet who strove to loosen Chinese poetry from its traditional form and to reshape and under the influence of Western poetry and the vernacular Chinese language. He is considered one of the most important figures of modern Chinese poetry. Zhu was born in Haining, Zhejiang, and graduated from Hangzhou High School, a school known for its fame in southern China. He married Zhang Zouyi in 1915 and proceeded to attend Peiyang University in 1916. Now, Taizhen University to study law in 1917. He moved to Peking University due to the law department. Poets Li Gengzhou, China's greatest woman poet, whose work, true and survives only in fragments, continues to be highly regarded as it was in her own day.
Mourn his husband by Confucius. Confucius. His father died when Confucius was only 3 years of age, but he was very careful, brought up his mother, Yang Shi, and from his early years displayed an extraordinary love of learning and veneration for the ancient law for his country. When only 19, Confucius marriage, but divorced his 4 years after marriage, but he might have more lives for study and the performance of his public duties. Confucius, the great Chinese sage, was born June 19, 551 BC at the Shanping in the country of Luo. His own name was Kong, but his display called him Confucius. Kong, a master of teacher, which of the Silhouette missionaries Latinized into Confucius. A wife mourned for his husband. The delicious grow up covers from the terms, or the waste is the dragon plant creeping. The man of my heart is way, and I mourns. What home but I lonely and the weeping. Covering the jujubes, the delicious grow. The graves many dragon plants covers. But where is the man on whose breast I refuse? No home having no lovers. First to say, was a pillow of horn, and first the bed chambers adorning, but the man of my heart is not here, and I mourn all along and wait for the mornings, when a long days of summer pass over my head, and long winter nights live there that race. I'm alone till 100 of years shall have died, and then I shall meet the embrace. Through the long winter nights and burdened with fears, through the long summer days, and I lonely, but when then shall I have counted its 100 of years, and then shall we shall be his and she's holy.